where monumental forces of nature prevail. It's a panorama of the greatest natural wonders on the planet. Products of fire and ice, wind, water, and time. Where the air is pure and the horizon distant, we'll explore the extraordinary, places to elevate the spirit and humble the soul. From the mysterious to the magical to the magnificent, these definitive wonders are too awe-inspiring to miss. Beneath the world's most breathtaking beauty beats a heart of fire. Hawaii Volcanoes National Park on the island of Hawaii is the place to get up close to one of the world's hottest spots. On the summit of the Kilauea volcano, a voluminous plume of steam and gas jets thousands of feet into the air. This first explosive eruption in the Halemaumau crater in over 80 years reminds us there's much more to come. From the coast of Kilauea to the summit of Mauna Loa, Hawaii Volcanoes National Park surrounds two supervolcanoes. Millions of years of eruptions built up shield shapes. Mauna Loa means long mountain, and there's more than meets the eye. Measured from the ocean floor to the summit, it's the world's most massive volcano. In its shadow, Kilauea is one of the world's most active volcanoes. Nearly continuous lava flows since 1983 have added over 550 acres to the Big Island.
We're on an active volcano. Things are always happening. Things are always changing. And as a geologist, you know, in most places, you don't see geologic change in your lifetime, much less in the course of a week. And here in Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, things can change in a day's time.
Once considered a curiosity, Kilauea's ongoing eruptions and accessibility offer an unprecedented opportunity to observe the inner workings of a shield volcano. From a hotspot deep within the earth, magma or molten rock rises beneath the summit of Kilauea to Pu'uo'o. From there, it travels by surface flows or below ground through lava tubes to empty out into the Pacific Ocean. When a section of the roof of a tube caves in, a skylight reveals red-hot lava. Volcanologists regularly retrieve samples, checking for chemical changes or anything to gauge the pulse of the volcano. Along the south flank of Kilauea, volcano watchers get unprecedented access.
People can drive right around the summit and onto the caldera floor. They can hike across the caldera. There are craters like Kilauea that you can hike across. You can see land that's less than an hour old. So I think the dynamic ever-changing landscape of Hawaii Volcanoes National Park is what makes it unique and special.
As older volcanoes lie dormant, new ones form. Nearly 15 miles southeast of the island of Hawaii, Loihi, a potential new island in the chain, is rising up flow by flow. Within 3,100 feet of sea level, scientists predict it will take some 250,000 years to surface, in an ongoing process that created 80% of the Earth. Named after Vulcan, the Roman god of fire, there's no telling what volcanoes will do. In northwest Wyoming, along the Yellowstone Plateau, millions of annual visitors stand in awe. There is a superstar. The most predictable of Yellowstone's largest geysers, Old Faithful delivers 17 times a day on average, exploding in magnificent bursts of steam. A volcano without peer, Yellowstone surrounds one of the largest and most accessible volcanic calderas in the world.
Most of the hotspots on Earth are found beneath the ocean, and they form ocean islands. This is one of the few on Earth that's found right in the middle of a continent.
A hotspot generating heat flows 30 to 40 times greater than the global average. Deep within the Earth, a partly molten body called the Yellowstone plume is thought to power the entire system. On the surface of a supervolcano, there are plenty of signs of unrest. An eruptive past produced an unearthly landscape.
So this has occurred several times at Yellowstone, 3 times specifically, with very large eruptions, and that lays the groundwork for everything that we see at Yellowstone today. The Yellowstone caldera, the most recent caldera formed at Yellowstone, is on the order of 50 miles long by 30 miles wide. It's an enormous area. The magma chamber beneath Yellowstone roughly is that same region.
Heat rising from the magma chamber meets an alpine climate to fuel over 10,000 thermal features. Among them, geysers are most rare. Yellowstone has the largest concentration in the world. No two are alike. Within a short distance, there are significant differences in temperature, chemistry, and history. The Yellowstone Volcano Observatory tracks the heat, looking for any indication of change in the state of the volcano. Another hotspot, Lake Yellowstone, formed when water filled in a colossal depression in the caldera.
It's also very geologically active in that it's a place where hydrothermal explosions have been seen in the past. Many of the bays around the lake are created by explosions of the hot water system that's right beneath the ground at Yellowstone.
In a complex geoecosystem, the power of destruction is balanced by the resilience of life. A veritable Eden for over 400 species. It's one of a few places on the planet with intact predator-prey populations and long-distance migration. Geothermal features spawn thermophiles. Microscopic organisms that thrive in the heat provide the vivid rings of color. Researchers continue to discover new forms of life. Vast, beautiful, and untamed. The world's oldest and most famous national park is first and foremost a geological paradise. There is no place like Yellowstone. Rolling, tumbling, crashing and churning, the mighty Colorado twists and turns across the great American Southwest. As the Colorado Plateau continues its slow thrust skyward, water, powered by gravity, cuts through rock like a master sculptor, leaving an array of jaw-dropping wonders in its wake. Among them, the Grand Canyon of the Colorado River. From mile-high walls, a mountainous labyrinth is a glimpse back into nearly 2 billion years. dominated by the 18-mile-wide canyon dividing the park into the north and south rims.
We think of the Grand Canyon as one canyon. In many ways it is, because we have one major river flowing through it. But the Grand Canyon as we know it is huge. And so really, yeah, there's this little tiny ribbon of inner gorge corridor that we would say is the Colorado River. And then there's this massive area outside of it. And there's literally hundreds of miles of side canyons, off of side canyons, off of side canyons. And when you think about the niche, the habitats, that's what's critical to the canyon.
The enormity is hard to grasp. Step off the rim, it's a rugged, diverse environment.
In the lower 48, certainly this park has some of the greatest biodiversity of any other national park. I think there's over 1,500 plant species. And the dramatic thing about it is the elevation change from top to bottom. And we're at about 6,000 feet above sea level here on the south rim. The north rim is about 1,000 feet higher on average. And at the bottom, the elevation is about 2,500 feet above sea level. So you have more than a vertical mile of difference.
Along the canyon floor, the Colorado River relentlessly continues its 5 to 6 million year course. As the drop in elevation accelerates currents, water flows into the river from a multitude of side canyons, carrying sediment and boulders to create rapids. After the whitewater, the river calms. Time only seems to stand still. The processes that created the canyon continue. Flash floods and other catastrophic events, along with weathering, make the rate of widening and deepening impossible to predict. While the Grand Canyon's rocks aren't the oldest in the world, its geological window unravels the mysteries of eras of the Earth's evolution, inspiring an ultimate sense of wonder.
It changes every day. It changes from minute to minute, hour to hour, day to day, and season to season.
After studying this thing over 30 years, I feel like I know it well enough to say I really don't know it at all. It's just phenomenal. It's so huge. We're not going to fully ever understand it.
Walls tell the story of change, of people and seas that come and go, of mesas turned into buttes, and buttes turned into spires, of time and a river in perpetual motion. Mere words don't do it justice. Sunset is a sacred hour when nature's supreme spectacle comes full spectrum. Among America's great wonders, colorful plateaus and cliffs ascend northward from the Grand Canyon in Arizona to Utah to form the Grand Staircase. Immense step-like layers of rock spanning 600 million years.
The rocks of the Grand Canyon were formed prior to the dinosaurs. They're Paleozoic and older rocks. And then we have Zion National Park, which is formed during the time of the dinosaurs. We call it the Mesozoic era, and the Jurassic is part of that. And then the more recent era is the Cenozoic, which is where Bryce is. So really all the major periods of geologic time are exposed right in this immediate area, so people can study and look at how the Earth has changed over about half its history.
On the edge of the Colorado Plateau, it was Zion Canyon's cathedrals of Navajo sandstone that astonished the early explorers. Described as heaven on earth, towering monoliths will make a believer out of you. If rocks could talk, they would tell of tall, drifting, Sahara-like sand dunes.
And as the wind was blowing, the sand would get laid down on the back side of the sand dune, so we get these sweeping layers within the sand that are preserved. And we call that cross-bedding. It's one of the main features here in Zion. And behind us here is the Checkerboard Mesa area, and it's a real famous landmark because it has those diagonal lines from the cross-bedding, but it also has a series of vertical cracks in it so that when they interact, they form a checkerboard type pattern. And those vertical cracks are because of the huge temperature fluctuations we get here.
In arid country, it may surprise you that a primary architect is water. Once near sea level, uplifting of the plateau raised the region over 8,000 feet in elevation.
It's still being uplifted today. And if I take rock and I start pushing it up, any rivers flowing down through that area are going to start slicing down through that rock. Rivers are trying to reach sea level, and the higher you lift the river up, the faster the water runs and the faster it cuts down through the rocks.
The flat bottom of Zion Canyon formed when a landslide dammed the Virgin River, creating a temporary lake. Each year, the river moves an average of 1 million tons of rock debris downstream. Swift currents cut deep slots. Canyons get smoothed and polished by the abrasive force. Among them, the Narrows, a 16-mile stretch, is a divine tribute to erosive power. One of the superlative hikes in any national park, around every bend of the Virgin River, there's something special. From the plateau above, water percolates down to nourish a dripping spring. A hanging garden of moss and ferns grows right out of the wall. In a lush oasis, a moisture-loving yucca and an alpine fir thrive side by side. The Narrows eventually taper to a point 20 feet wide, with vertical walls spanning a lofty 2,000 feet.
People refer to Zion as a heavenly city of God. And if that's true, then I look at the Zion Narrows as God's private chambers.
The Mormons came to Utah to escape religious persecution back east. For them, Zion was a godsend.
The use of the word Zion as a name for this area relates to the Mormon faith and to the scriptures in the Bible, especially in Isaiah, referring to Zion as a place of sanctuary, as a place where people would gather, as a place of beauty and a place in the mountains.
A religious refuge became a natural refuge for plants and wildlife. To soar above towering walls, Angel's Landing gets its name from an early visitor who thought only an angel could land on top of it. Hardy souls who make it to the summit are rewarded with a 360 panorama. A wonder among wonders, the mystical formations of the Colorado Plateau have captivated people for centuries. In Canyonlands National Park, Utah's largest, Mesa Arch basks in the rays of the morning sun. Atop a broad mesa, the forces that created America's canyon country are at work. Down below, the narrow, winding gorges of the Colorado connect with the Green River, its largest tributary. In an immense tapestry of canyon upon canyon, the dominant rock is sandstone.
I think the rock in the southwest is pretty much characterized by sedimentary rock, just rock laid down layer after layer over time, and it's being eroded by natural elements. Mainly water, a little bit of wind transporting things around, but it's being carved out by Mother Nature into some pretty spectacular scenery.
Red from iron oxide is the primary color, along with a rich array of hues. At Upheaval Dome, rock layers are dramatically deformed around a bullseye pattern nearly 3 miles across. Lack of rainfall discouraged the early settlers, with one exception. In the remote Horseshoe Canyon, an ancient culture created a masterpiece. The Great Gallery's tapered, life-size figures are etched into the desert varnish, a thin layer of iron and manganese oxides. Experts speculate the art dates back to the late Archaic period, from approximately 2100 BC to 500 AD. One of the finest examples of prehistoric art, it remains as much a mystery as the ancients that left it behind. In a wilderness of rock, the graceful outline of a freestanding span is a marvel. Neighboring Arches National Park has over 2,000 natural arches in various stages of evolution, the largest concentration in the world.
Basically what's happening in arches is you have sandstone deposits that were cracked and are now exposed, and how they were cracked was in very parallel type lines. And so as erosion has worked down into those cracks, it's exposed these very tall, narrow fins. And water just finds a weak spot in that fin and starts working away, slowly eroding out until it breaks through. Water continues to work on it, and over time you get an opening that's at least 3 feet. And there you go on your journey to becoming a bigger arch.
At 306 feet, Landscape Arch is the longest in the world. Each one is unique. Gracefully balanced on the edge of a small canyon, over 70,000 years of water, frost, wind, and dryness form the park's most famous delicate arch. Delicate and temporary. Like all arches, it will one day give way. Beyond canyons and arches, there's a multitude of stone silhouettes set against sapphire skies. In this land of contours and clouds, millions of years of history lie exposed. Beyond their scenic splendor, our national parks are game preserves, set aside as wonders for the world's wildlife. Along the stormy shores of the Alaskan Peninsula, steep cliffs rise over 7,000 feet above the Shelikof Strait. In the remote wilderness of Katmai National Park, Ursus arctos horribilis, one of the world's largest land mammals, moves about undisturbed by man. Called brown bears, these survivors of the Ice Age with the trademark hump are genetically the same as grizzlies. The key difference, their massive size. At over 900 pounds, brown bears can weigh twice as much. Congregating around the meadow at Hallow Bay, mating season has begun. Males are on the move.
They eat very little in June, and they're just walking and wandering, hoping to cross the scent of a female bear. And the females aren't ready to accept the males yet, so that they're running from them. This is a large adult male. This bear's probably a 15-year-old bear, and you can see how scarred up he is from fighting with other bears. Well, this is just another mating pair over here, and you can see they're just, the female's not ready to accept the male, the darker male, and she'll just continue to walk away from him probably for another week or 10 days. And these young males, you notice this big male over here, he now has walked in here. He's scented all these females. He's not going to waste his time. Young males like this one will continue to follow females and chase females even though they're not ready to accept them. The older, more experienced bears don't waste the energy.
In the land of the midnight sun, mating season goes on from May to July. Cubs born in midwinter will stay with their mother for at least 2 years. Leaving the rugged coastline for the northwestern side of the Aleutian Range, active volcanoes line the valley. In 1912, Nova Rupta erupted, unleashing a steaming 40-square-mile ash flow dubbed the Valley of 10,000 Smokes. Katmai was proclaimed the next Yellowstone until fate intervened and Nova Rupta cooled. To protect the wildlife, the Naknek Drainage and Brooks Falls were later added to the park. Called the Lake Region, it's the site of another natural phenomenon. Sockeye salmon on the last leg of their life cycle journey from Bristol Bay to spawn and lay their eggs in the gravel-bedded freshwaters of their birth. At the same time, North America's largest land predators are fattening up for a long winter. By July, both species converge on the Naknek system of rivers and lakes.
We'll get bears at Brooks Falls waiting for these massive aggregations of fish that are trying to jump over the waterfall to get into Brooks Lake. And as a result, we have a group of bears on site in Brooks River that numbers 50 plus, sometimes 70 plus. There's a lot of competition among bears for space and opportunity.
The massive meet draws plenty of people. Along the shore of Lake Naknek, floatplanes connect to Brooks Camp. This rustic enclave of cabins is a safe haven. Even though the abundance of food makes the bears more tolerant of humans, it's a close encounter. July is the time to observe fishing at the falls. By September, bears are dispersed in the river feeding on spawned salmon that have turned from silver to bright red. Whether at Brooks Camp or Hallow Bay, just being in the realm of this top predator is astounding.
When you're out there with those bears, everything else in your mind goes away. You have to be totally focused on those bears. I think our psyche demands us to be totally focused because we know we're smaller than they are, but also just their mannerisms and just the magnificence of them.
Katmai's combination of active volcanoes and over 2,000 brown bears has come to symbolize the raw power of the wilderness. Among America's top wildlife parks, in South Florida, freshwater, swamplands, and wetlands meet saltwater and mangroves to create a subtropical wonder. Everglades National Park protects the only Everglades in the world.
Everglades National Park is the last vestige of any kind of wild lands in the East. Because Everglades National Park sits at the southern tip of Florida, and Florida is a rapidly developing state, there's a lot of pressures.
A flat seabed submerged at the end of the last ice age forms the base for rooting plants along a shallow river of grass. It's a migration corridor, a sanctuary, a feeding and breeding ground for over 350 species of birds and more.
Where we sit on the latitude that we're at, I mean, we get a lot of the temperate animals, in other words, the ones that in North America you're always used to, bears and for this matter, mountain lions or cougars, and we get the more tropical species like alligators and manatee and dolphins and sea turtles. So it's kind of where these two systems kind of overlap. That's what really makes this place very unique.
Many depend on the fragile wetlands impacted by development hundreds of miles upstream.
Looking for the nest. Start our nest checks. Okay, there's the pond. There's that pond. It's a pretty good sized female.
Originally established to protect the ecosystem, scientists monitor keystone species as a barometer of the health of the Everglades.
A lot of people ask you the questions, well, what good's an alligator? A lot of times when they mound nests and things like that, vegetation gets started on that nest, and sometimes they can literally create tree islands as a result of that. So they're really important for maintaining the system.
I'm only letting her come to about the length of my stick, then I'm gonna have to get her back, okay? Wait one exit. Okay, but just have put any back. Yeah, I need to put her back.
And as it is with any big predator like this, they're dependent upon the animals that are there. If you've got good, healthy alligator populations here, then you've got a good, healthy system.
The park is a habitat for another keystone crocodilian. At the end of the Everglades, this rare reptile inhabits the brackish areas where fresh and saltwater meet. For the American crocodile, restoration of nesting habitat and the creation of a croc sanctuary has increased the numbers of this reclusive predator. For the creatures of the Everglades, it's a delicate balance. Reproductive cycles are in sync with the wet and dry periods. Despite hurricanes and tropical storms, climate and sea levels have remained fairly constant for some 5,000 years. An International Biosphere Reserve and World Heritage Site, it's an ongoing challenge to ensure the natural rhythms of the Everglades carry on and on. The name is foreboding. The starkness of Death Valley takes some getting used to. In the Mojave Desert, along the border between California and Nevada, it's a consummate land of extremes. The hottest, driest, lowest spot in North America. A 156-mile-long valley surrounded by 9 mountain ranges is part of the Great Basin and Range region.
The simplest thing is to think of it as blocks of rock that have been tilted and pulled apart, and the bottom of the valley has dropped down as the mountains through time have been pushed up. A valley would be something that's been shaped by a glacier. Yosemite Valley is a true valley. So Death Valley, if we're speaking geologically, is more considered a half graben, but water has shaped things within the valley. I mean, we know there was a lake here that was 600 feet deep, but there were never glaciers here.
The Shoshone Indians called it Tomisha, meaning ground on fire. It's no surprise the world's second hottest temperature of 134 degrees was recorded here. Centuries of water accumulating and evaporating in an ancient lake left salt flats covering over 200 square miles. Badwater, the lowest point in North America, is 282 feet below sea level. Complex, relatively young rock exposure makes for a mixed bag of geology. On a wind-stripped surface, blowing sands piled up sweeping dunes. Earthquakes and eruptions wreaked havoc. Yuba Hibi, the youngest of the volcanoes, blew its top less than 1,000 years ago.
But the crater itself is unique not only because it's the most recent geological feature, but because it's an area that could be active again. It's what we call a Mar volcano, a steam explosion crater. So that hot magma reached the groundwater, and then there was a huge steam explosion sending ash up into the air, you know. And so we see the ashes scattered around there.
The direction of the explosion left one side of the crater with sheer walls, piling up a mountain of cinders on the other side. At artist's palette, volcanic rock altered by hydrothermal heat create a kaleidoscope of color. From Zabriskie Point, time and water turn badlands into beauty. Mosaic Canyon's sculpted passageway leads to mosaic-like fragments of stone. Amazingly, Darwin Falls cascades year-round in one of the hottest, driest places on the planet. And over 1,000 types of plants manage to survive.
The first thing people are surprised about in Death Valley is that it's got life. I mean, Death Valley and all that, so if there's anything alive, that's the thing that kind of shocks them. In fact, I've heard very often from people, oh, it shouldn't be Death Valley, it should be the Valley of Life, which is a stretch because it's so extreme here. The life that's here is very sparse, but it's highly adapted to dealing with those extremes.
If rain does fall, Badwater Basin can turn back into a body of water. If conditions are just right, spring showers bring wildflowers to the land of extremes. From North America's lowest point, our next wonder encompasses its highest peak. Denali National Park and Preserve is an icon of unspoiled Alaska. Braided rivers meander through vast tundra. Animals roam country that goes on seemingly forever. The perpetually snow-covered 600-mile arc of the Alaska Range is a dramatic backdrop to a 6 million-acre park. Towering above it all, at 20,320 feet, Mount McKinley rivals the Earth's greatest summits. The native Athabascans called it Denali, meaning the High One. Even with its pair of peaks shrouded in clouds, it dominates the scenery. The building of North America's most massive mountain began some 56 million years ago. The secret to its size? Hard granite rock is surrounded by softer sedimentary rock that weathers away, exposing more of the granite.
It also is uplifting at a rate of about 1, maybe 2 millimeters per year currently. We're sort of a receiving end of a big conveyor belt that we think of as the Pacific Plate or Pacific Ocean Plate. And that plate is migrating northward and slamming into Alaska and crunching it against the Arctic Basin, kind of like a big accordion. So it's getting pushed up by that crunch.
As the mountain rises, surrounding glaciers wear it down, carving out gorges and valleys. Ruth Glacier descends from the southeast side of Mount McKinley.
It takes a couple things to cause a glacier. One is something high that catches the snow and is cold like a mountain range. And because the Alaska Range is so high, the glaciers form easily on it and then flow 20 or 30 miles down the side of Mount McKinley.
Moving 3 feet a day, 4 million pounds of ice may flow into and out of Ruth Gorge. Superlative and daunting, McKinley has been a magnet for mountaineers for over a century.
And we'll just stick to that trail. We'll probe on the way. Double back.
Double back.
Okay. Climbing.
Going to the mountain means traversing glaciers.
A glacier is a river of ice, and it behaves much like a river. The outside curves are a little faster than the inside curves, so the ice is flowing more. And where you have different speeds of ice flow, you're going to get crevasses. Where you have the ice going over a steep bit, a bulge, or dropping in elevation quite rapidly, you're going to find crevassing typically. The reality of glaciers, though, is that their cracks could be anywhere and going any direction, so you need to be observant the whole time that you're traveling on them.
From extreme ice to extreme altitude, scaling a mountain of this magnitude comes with multiple hazards. Of the 1,200 who attempt it each year, roughly half of the expeditions make it to the top. Out where things are grand scale, the park was originally preserved as a refuge for wildlife. It contains the 3,900-mile migratory range of the Denali caribou herd and large subarctic mammal populations. On the north side, a receding glacier scooped out a depression 2.5 miles long and over 260 feet deep. The view of Mount McKinley has become a classic image of the American wilderness. Among the multitude of national parks offering an inspirational glimpse into the natural world, our final wonder is a place of beauty. In the heart of Northern California's Sierra Nevada range, there's the incomparable valley. The vertical profile of El Capitan, rising 3,000 feet. The lofty summit of Cloud's Rest. The massive face of Half Dome. All world-renowned. Then there are the waterfalls. Bridal Veil descends over 600 feet from a hanging valley created when a glacier moved down the Central Valley and cut off the base of a tributary. When the glacier receded, the creek had nowhere else to go but right off the cliff. Yosemite Falls is one of the tallest in the world. Formed by the uplift and tilting of a huge block of the Earth's crust, the Sierra Nevada is still on the rise. Yosemite's superlative walls and domes also owe their shapes and sizes to the type of rock. While it might look uniform, the structure and composition is diverse.
What we're seeing behind me on the left is El Capitan, which is the most monolithic wall in Yosemite Valley. And to the left of it, you see a hillside that has trees and lots of broken up rocks on it. And we're looking at the difference between the weakest rock in Yosemite Valley, which is a diorite, and the hardest rock in Yosemite Valley, which is a granite. The only place in Yosemite Valley where we have true granite is on the face of El Capitan and across the way at Taft Point. All the other rocks we're seeing are related to granite, but not true granite.
Glaciers, water, and gravity put the architectural touches on the rock to create a supreme landscape. The headwaters of the Merced originate along the crest of the Sierra Nevada, then descend over 11,000 feet on the path to the Central Valley. cascading over the giant staircase at Nevada Fall. From the mist trail, it's a glorious sight. Vernal Fall drops the final 317 feet. The Merced meanders through the valley floor, mirroring the view. All in all, it's one of the world's most scenic stretches of wild river. Over a century since its founding, countless visitors, scientists, artists, and writers have marveled at Yosemite.
Although Yellowstone considers themselves the first national park in 1872, in 1864, President Abraham Lincoln set aside Yosemite Valley and the Mariposa Grove as forest reserves. This was known as the Yosemite Grant and was the first time in not only the history of this country, but the history of the world, that a piece of land was set aside strictly for preservation.
Among those who lobbied to protect it, naturalist John Muir was in a class by himself.
He really saw the importance and the beauty and recognized the basic fundamental need of wild places for our well-being. And this was a revolutionary thought at the time.
John Muir wrote about Yosemite in ways that inspired people. His vision led to the founding of the Sierra Club and a modern conservation movement. From Yosemite, the idea of preservation took root, generating parks and preserves in over 100 nations around the world. Today, the greatest wonder is the wilderness itself. Enormous expanses of land that lie unhindered by humans, where the raw power of nature is always changing. Time is measured in millions and billions of years. A precious habitat for plants and animals is a supreme refuge for the spirit.